Today's reading is from the Song of the Avadhut, the Awakened One. Om pervades everything equally, like space. Within it, there are no distinctions, such as high and low. The formless, unmanifest, manifests as form. How else could the imperishable show forth its light? Thou art that, the scriptures proclaim. Thou art that, one's own self affirms. You are beyond all diversification, the same self in all. Why lament then, O mine? I'm the same self in all. Beyond high and low, I am the same self in all. Beyond inner and outer, I'm the same self in all. If there is only the one, I'm the same self in all. Why lament then, O mind? I am the same self in all. There's no real distinction between the imaginer and the imagination. There's no real distinction between the cause and its effect. A poem and its words are one and the same. Why lament then, O mind? I'm the same self in all. There's no knowledge and no ignorance in the experience of unity. There's no near and no far in the experience of unity. There's no time and no eternity in the experience of unity. Why lament then, O mind? I'm the same self in all. There's no space in the jar, nor even a jar. There's no container of the soul, nor even a soul. There's no separation between cause and effect. Why lament then, O mind? I'm the same self in all. Here, in the realm of unity, everyone is eternally free. A short time and a long time have no meaning here. Here, no distinction, such as fat or thin, exists. Why lament then, O mind? I am the same self in all. Here is neither emptiness nor fullness. Here is neither purity nor impurity. Here is neither the all nor its absence. Why lament then, O mind? I'm the same self in all. There is no distinction, such as divided or undivided. There's no distinction, such as within or without. Beyond the distinction of enemy or friend, I am the same self in all. Why lament then, O mind? I'm the same self in all. There's no disciple. There's no non-disciple in the one reality. There's no one evolving and no one not evolving. Here in the state of unity, everyone is eternally free. Why lament then, O mind? I'm the same self in all. The self is beyond form and formlessness, is it not? It is beyond division and non-division, is it not? It is beyond creation and the absence of creation, is it not? Why lament then, O mind? I am the same self in all. Nothing else can bind me. How could I be bound by actions in this life or in an afterlife? I am the pure, stainless self, the same within all. Why lament then, O mind? I am the same self in all. Shanti, Shanti. Welcome. that you're aware? Look. Who can see? I'm aware. Now drop I. Are you less aware if there's no thought? I am aware. If there's no thought, I'm aware that I am aware. Are you less aware? Just be aware. Don't think about it. Nobody is being aware. Nothing is being aware. Stop looking for what is aware. Just be here. Aware. And rest. Rest fully. Stop in every way. Be aware. When there is no thought, when there is no I am aware, when there's no I am aware that I am aware, there is only being. As awareness itself. You are that. to see this clearly, you have to leave all your stories. You have to just be. Being knows, I am here. I am aware. But has no need to say so. Some of you can see already this place that I'm pointing at. I call it a place, but it's not a place. It's a being. Satchitananda, being, consciousness, bliss. You are that. If you can't see this yet, it's okay. Just keep asking. Am I aware? Am I aware that I'm aware? What is aware? Who am I? This is a gentle asking, though. This is not pushing the mind into a box, suppressing emotion, understanding with the mind. This is a gentle drifting into your own nature, not creating something new, but recognizing who you are as Sat, Chit, Ananda, being, consciousness, bliss. This is the recognition that everything you can perceive in world, body, and mind is in some way not you. And yet, when you finally understand who you are as awareness itself, there is a recognition, and all of this is myself. This is the recognition of unity. Until this recognition of your natural state arises, just persist with the question, who am I? What is aware? Or am I aware? Whatever suits you. If you do this gently but persistently, you'll slowly let go of everything you are not. Until it becomes your natural habit to just rest in what you are, awareness itself. And you won't any longer struggle with what you are or what you are not. This is what Dr. Treya is talking about in this passage today from the Song of the Advocate. He's posing all of the opposites and saying, you are not that. And the full recognition of this teaching is that I am nothing. And yet, I am everything. It's a paradox, isn't it? But in some ways, by grappling with these kinds of paradoxes, we're able to get the mind to stop grappling with the paradoxes. We get it to leave us alone so that we can be here, now. As this awareness. In some ways it can be said, this helps us to discover what is already here and put to rest the tendency to argue with it all, to want to find meaning in it all, to want to find me in it all, but rather just to rest in it as it is. This is the recognition of unity. It's not a concept. But rather the truth of your own nature. This recognition can bring us great joy, great happiness, and yet it fundamentally leaves us in the center of our own ordinariness. Nothing special, just the nature of what is. Can you see what's being pointed to? something you want to say?
I don't know how to say it. Been looking at Vedana, or like pleasant, unpleasant feeling tone, and noticing a lot of that in neutral. And I'm not sure where I'm going with this, but it seems like there are moments, like most of the time, it's there, where it's something's pleasant and I want it, or something's unpleasant and I don't want it, or something's neutral and I'm kind of don't usually want that either. But there are moments where there's just nothing. I don't know how to say.
Okay. There are moments when there are nothing, when there is nothing.
Just
right?
nothing. Yeah.
Yes. There is pleasant, unpleasant, neutral, and nothing. Understand? These are all states of mind, yeah.
Yeah.
And
I'm not even sure. I don't know what I'm trying to say. I guess everything seems a little like blank, you know?
yes,
And I'm curious about that. I don't
Yes.
understand that. I don't know.
yes.
Not that I have to do anything with it, but it's
No, but I'm going to tell you to do something with it.
okay.
This is a common experience of practitioners. That we begin at the interface of senses and objects, and we begin to notice that the senses and the objects have this feeling quality depending upon which sense is open and which object is being observed. And the quality of those can be labeled pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. And we can undertake this kind of observation for a long period of time. But what it means when the recognition of nothingness arises in the mind is that we've lost interest in the objects, we've lost interest in the senses, we've lost interest in the quality of the senses as pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral. So the natural recognition of mind at that moment is nothing. There is nothing. And the typical response is one of two things. I fall asleep. I see that I'm bored. This is typically what happens in that recognition of nothing or nothingness. When we fall asleep from that position, that's referred to in Sanskrit as laya. And this is where we sink into a deep torpor or a deep boredom. But boredom eventually gives space to torpor, and torpor eventually gives space for sleep. This is what we do every night when we go to sleep, so this is not something we're unfamiliar with or something that's wrong. This is what we do each night. You can watch this happen as you go to sleep. That you have to completely lose interest in all the senses, right? In pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral. And then you have to move into this space of nothingness. And then deep sleep occurs. This is a natural way of happening. this can happen also when you're in your sit, when you're meditating, when you're just sitting and you have nothing to do, and then you're just enjoying the pleasantness of the day, or you're sitting on your veranda or in your cozy chair, and then you'll fall asleep eventually. But what happens if, when you recognize nothingness, so you've moved through all those stages and you recognize this is nothingness, what would happen? What would be the consequence of you asking, and what is aware of this?
Well, first my mind looks for an object, nothingness.
Yes, the object is nothingness in this case, right? But the mind defines nothingness as what?
Nothing.
Nothing. Yes. And this is why it becomes bored, right? It falls asleep. Because to the mind, nothingness is a concept in which nothing interesting is happening, right? There is no doing. So if we want to go deeper than that, we have to ask the question, and what is aware of this? This nothingness, right? If not, we fall into Leia. We get bored, we just give it up and go do something to entertain the mind. Right? But if you don't do that right now, just leave the mind empty in nothingness, which is a little bit hard to do because I'm giving the mind something to, some little sweetie to chew on right now, right? These words. But go back to nothing. Are you less aware because nothing is here? So what is the nature of this awareness? Be interested in that. You see, it's this interest in what is aware that makes it possible for us to not fall asleep, to not become bored and go entertain the mind in some other way. We have to become fiercely interested in what is aware. And if at some point we slip into sleep or we slip into some sort of a torpor state, when we come back we just have to understand that we forgot to ask the question, what is aware of this? And the reason I use this language, what is aware of this, rather than the language, who am I, at this point, is because we also don't want to plunge the mind back into the search for me, right? We don't want to do that anymore. We've had enough of the search for me and mine. We want to know what's at the root of all of this. So now we have to depersonalize it completely. Recognize that there is no me and no mine, especially in this moment. There's nothing there, right? But if we don't notice, awareness is still here. Awareness is what is seeing. Now I'm using awareness as a word, but obviously this is not a word, it's not a concept. This is a direct perception you can have. It sounds something like, I am aware that nothing is here. It sounds somewhat like that. But you have to go back to this place of asking, what is aware of this? This is very impersonal, right? So now I am not bored. I am not the witness of what is pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral, right? All of this I-ness, which is dependent on an object, is dropped. So that we can see clearly that awareness is. And awareness can be aware of nothing. This is the concept of nothing. Right? This nothing that you're referring to that becomes boring and causes us to fall asleep is the concept of nothing in the mind. It's not the recognition, there is nothing but this, that which is aware. Okay? So we ask the question, and what is aware of this?
There's a lot of doubt that comes with that. Doubt arises after that.
Yes. So, what you're saying is the mind just moves toward a different object. See? What is aware of that? Ask yourself. Now what comes?
Looking for something.
What is aware of that? You're still looking.
I'm still looking.
Mm-hmm. Look for what's looking.
Why does that feel so scary today?
What's aware of scary? You see, the mind has moved to a new object now, right? It went from nothing. Can you turn the volume down on that a little bit? It went from nothing, right, to doubt, to scary.
Mm-hmm.
Are you aware that this is what your mind does all the time? Okay, so what is aware of that? What's aware of that and doesn't need to change the definition of what's happening?
There aren't words for what's aware of that, but my mind keeps jumping to the everything, to looking for it.
Yeah, this is the habitual way of the mind. I've described this in the past, maybe to you, but I'm not sure. That this is like being in a thick forest. The mind is like being in a thick forest. And we're walking through the forest and everything is fine, everything is wonderful. We just are there as the forest, as the recognition of the forest. And suddenly we catch a movement behind a tree over here. And we turn, because it's in our peripheral vision, we turn and we look and we wait. And then the movement's over here, behind this tree. So now attention moves to this tree. Now there's movement here, behind that tree. This is what the mind does. The mind is always there in our peripheral vision. And attention wants to always go to whatever movement is there. This is just a habit of the mind. It happens this way. And for some of us, for a long time, we look from that tree to that tree to that tree to that tree before we lose interest in it. So we look from nothingness to doubt, to fear, to tears, until we lose interest in that. And then the question, and what is aware of this, or who am I, really begins to take root. Why? Because no matter what happens in the peripheral vision, or what happens in the field of objects, we've lost the interest in it sufficiently as the doer, as the knower, right? That we just don't move in that direction anymore. So now we're free to walk through the forest without being caught by every movement of the wind in the trees, right? Or in the grass. So this is why we keep asking, what is aware of this? So what is aware of this? All of this activity. What's aware of the mind jumping from definition to definition? In some way you have to say, I've lost interest in all my definitions. Right? Understand the definitions are associated with my mind. So if I lose interest in the definitions, the knower, the doer, then I begin to get glimpses of the forest. Not just the individual trees, but the forest. This forest is the natural state. Can you see this? Now? Right here? Now? Just don't look for anything. And even in this not looking, you can ask, what's aware of this? Can meet every single object that rises in the mind. Everything, every way the mind wants to define this, everything it wants to say, is it this? Is it that? Is this what he's talking about? Go back to what's aware of it. With the question, what's aware of this? See, this has to become our primary interest. And as we do this, the objects, the things that we're most comfortable with, the ideas, the concepts, the experiences that we're most familiar with, that's where our comfort zone is, these will begin to come at us faster and faster and faster. Right? This is the experience of nothingness turns to doubt, turns to fear, turns to tears. Right? This is that experience. The more we are willing to hang out, spend time with the question, and what is aware of this, and to do that as continuously as possible, even if it's only for a short period of time, but a longer period of time brings the conclusion more quickly in some way, prepares the field for the recognition of who you are. What typically happens for many of us, especially at the beginning of this particular, using this particular process, if you will, is that as things begin to come more quickly and they get more intense, right? You saw that movement from, as she described it, right? From nothingness to doubt, to fear, to the tears that are coming. So you can see the intensity of this recognition, this of asking this question, and what is aware of this. It can intensify very quickly. The solution is always the same, however. If you want to escape this kind of habitual patterning. And this is to keep asking, gently but persistently. Keep turning back to what is aware until you are unmoved by whatever the mind throws up. Is it still throwing things up for you?
Mm-hmm.
What's it throwing up now?
Just emotion and body sensation.
And when that's happening and it's intensifying, are you able to stay with this question? What's aware of this? All right. Keep going now. When we keep going in this way, what happens is eventually it all comes to a stop. The reason is that every time we ask the question, what is aware of this, or who am I, or am I aware? Am I aware that I'm aware? Anytime we use this kind of an inquiry-based question, we create a small gap in the habitual tendency to go from nothing to doubt, to fear, to tears, to the mind just wanting to take over with some basis in emotion in order to keep us interested or attracted. But each time we intervene in that particular chain, and you may have this chain yourself and you may not. You may have a similar chain, but not exactly this chain of habitual experience. But if you keep it persisting in some way, like I said, gently, but nonetheless persistently, with this encounter with what is aware, then what begins to happen is the gaps which come between each of these stages. It was beautiful that you shared that with us because you showed the way that it happens very rapidly. And this is often what isn't noticed. If we don't notice the panic or whatever it is that comes up with emptiness, with nothingness, we can be full on into meltdown before we ever have the opportunity to intervene in the way that this habit pattern is working in us. So what you've given us is the opportunity to see that there are steps here in some way, that this particular mind responds to the stimulus around it or to the objects around it. So this is beautiful. As soon as we begin to see that this is the pattern of the mind, we gain mastery over when do we ask the question and the gap, the size of the gap. Anytime we ask that question, the size of that spaciousness begins to open. And it's in the spaciousness that the opportunity to see, now I see I am not that thought, I'm not that emotion, I'm not that object, I'm not even I. But these things come like waves on the surface of the ocean, but I'm the ocean itself. Now this is possible. Through grace, through the recognition who I am.
Definitely through grace. There's part of me that doesn't want to ask.
And what is aware of that? Do you see the way the mind defends itself? Can you hear this? It defends this position of meanness. And it does it in so many different ways. That's why I like that example of something in your peripheral vision behind that tree and then behind that tree. Oh, there it is over there. But as long as you stay interested, right, it becomes very difficult. But it can break in a moment. That's why we persist with the question. So you ask that question again. What happened to that me? This is, I don't want to ask that question. What happened to that one?
Anyway.
Yes, it just passed, you see. what comes next after it goes away?
Other stories.
And if you let each one of those stories go?
Then I notice anything I can see is not me. Or not, whatever, I don't know what to call it.
You can say it's not real.
It's not real.
Because anything which rises, has a duration and falls, goes away. This is the definition of impermanence. Anything which is impermanent is not real. This is the foundation of asking the question, then what is real? See, once we begin to recognize that the objects, the movement in mind, emotions, feeling, world, is not real, and it is not me, then the question naturally rises, then what is real? The question naturally rises, well then, who am I? If I'm not these thoughts, responses, reactions, concepts, tendencies, who am I? Because if I strip away all of my reactions, tendencies, concepts, the one thing I know for sure in this moment, when all my concepts are gone, when they've been destroyed, when they've been burned up, the one thing I know for sure is I am here. Now I've thrown everything down. I've destroyed everything. Mind, concept, reality. I've thrown it all down. And yet, I'm here. Interesting. So what is the nature of this I? Who am I? What is aware? Where are you now?
Here.
Here. Ah. So it doesn't leave you with nothing, right? It doesn't leave you in the fear of nothingness. It simply leaves you here. Beautiful. Are you afraid to be here in this moment? Do you doubt being here in this moment? Are you unhappy to be here in this moment?
No.
Yes. So now you can begin to see, right, the unreality of all those concepts. And you can feel directly the realness of awareness. That it is what is real. It's what's here. If you strip away all those other tendencies, what you're left with is I am here. Are you afraid? You know, tears can come if you're afraid in nothingness, and they can also come when you're absolutely, completely, and fully embracing nothingness. This is where the true tears of joy come from. When you realize that in being nothing, you are everything. You are all of this. But now these are tears of joy. They're not tears of uncertainty or doubt or fear. So several of you have mentioned to me that you're going to be traveling over the next few weeks, almost half the room actually. So I wanted to just take a moment to remind those of you that are traveling soon that this is a golden opportunity for you to notice, direct perception, what it is that does not move. This becomes really clear when you notice it in the midst of your movement, whether you're traveling on a plane or a train or in a car or on a bus. When you begin to remember that you are aware, and you begin to notice that you're aware as the body moves, and as the mind anticipates where it's going and who it's going to see and what's happening, that you have a prime opportunity to see that which does not move. That which is present when you're here, it's present when you get to the next destination, it's present when you get on the train, it's present when you get on the plane, it's present when you get off the plane, it's present when you're in the new environment. So really take this as an opportunity, because this kind of movement of the body creates somehow an easy gateway to see that you are that which does not move. Even you have a story in the mind about what it is you're doing, where you're going, who you're going to see, and so on. If you don't want to get caught up in that story, then ask the question, what is aware of this? As everything is continuously changing around you. You can do this in your ordinary life too, but it becomes really focused when you're out of your ordinary environment and you're thrown into new environment. If you ask this question, what is aware of this? You begin to have the opportunity to touch that which does not move. So use it, right? Again, we're coming back to using everything that's in our experience. We're not denying our experience, we're not pushing it aside, and we're not separating. We're not letting the mind separate. Oh, well, this is different, this is who I am when I'm sitting on my cushion and Rishi's there talking to me, and this is who I am when I'm at 35,000 feet. We're coming to this place where we recognize that which is present, presence, as awareness, as consciousness, throughout all of the experiences of body-mind. So keep that in mind as you move. Keep the opportunity in mind.
Rishi, would you share some insights with us on the role that language could or should play in one's practice? I am I'm in a discussion group whereby there's a moving toward trying to come up with the perfect, like the incrementally more perfect language to describe an experience or a state of consciousness. And my personal view of that is it's an exercise in futility, because we can never come up with language that will perfectly. At the same time, I have a friend who is one of the most devoted, disciplined practitioners I know. He's been on his path for 40 years in a very devoted way, and he is just as steadfastly committed to articulating practices and potential insights and so forth. What role could or should language play in one's practice, would you say?
Yeah, it's a funny kind of a situation, right? It's like the practices in total. We have to use language in order to describe this focusing of attention on what is unborn, eternal, undying. What is this mystery which we experience directly as I am? I exist. So maybe this is as close as we can get to it with language, is this recognition I am. But we can't get to it directly until even the language I am is swept away. So then, of course, this begs the question, well then, how can this perception, experience, whatever you want to call it, this nature of true reality be expressed to another, right? So this is why we continue to follow the written words of the teaching, is because until we're ready to completely stop, full stop, no more interest in concepts, no more interest in tools, no more interest in practices. Until we hit that point, the words are necessary, the concepts are necessary. So for you, I might say, any one of you, I might say, oh, just drop that, you know, just drop that.
Drop that being.
Whatever concept you're working with, whatever languaging you're using, you know, at a certain point, I will say to you, drop that. Or, as I said to her, what is aware of that? What's aware of that concept? Well, this is the limit of concepts. Concepts will always bring us toward finer and finer and finer concepts. It's more and more subtle concepts. And understand, this is what sages do. This is what spiritual teachers do. Spiritual teachers, sages, are always looking for what will work. What do I mean by what will work? What will get you to leap off the cliff into emptiness, right? And for each of you, that's going to probably be a slightly different push. And of course, the Buddha and Sri Ramana both described this process of trying to get you to see what you cannot see, you can only be, is using a thorn to remove a thorn. So understand that all of the hindrances, all of the samskaras, all of the tendencies in the mind, they are what's veiling this truth, that you are that alone, that not being defined, this mystery that simply knows, it is simply aware, but you can't point to it, you can't name it. But if you drop all your concepts and I ask you, are you here, are you aware, the immediate answer is yes, when there's absolutely nothing in the mind. If I say to you, are you here? Yes. You know this. So this is the thorn to remove a thorn. All the words, all of the concepts, and this refinement of thought into these subtle realms is part of the field of endeavor on the gradual path. But do understand that the gradual path resolves itself suddenly. This is the end of all words, the full stopping of mind, not by constricting it and reducing it and admonishing it, but by the simple recognition that it doesn't exist. The mind is not something which has a foundational quality. It's just the thoughts. But in order to get to this place where we understand that what we're doing is following the mind around like a bull with a ring through its nose that's being pulled along, is when we come to see that there is no mind, that what we're defining as mind is a simple bundle of thoughts. So until we get to the point that we have that direct perception and we're completely willing to not pick up another concept, we use these more and more subtle concepts. And this is what your friend of 40 years is doing. The question always is not whether that's valid or not, because that is obviously valid, especially if your friend is also a spiritual teacher, because this person is trying to illuminate the various subtleties of mind in a way that will cause you to be willing to jump off the cliff into emptiness. The difficulty arises when we think that this parsing of the mind, this slicing of the mind, like an MRI, into smaller and smaller segments, is ultimately going to lead us to awakening. This is a falsehood. This has to be a falsehood because it's the use of mind. And all of the sages throughout 5,000 years of recorded history of the science, if you will, of awakening, have said that the mind, until the mind drops completely, but what I mean by drops completely is not that you go into deep sleep and you fall asleep, but drops completely, and what is left is awareing itself. Just awareness, which has no interest in pursuing anything else. It is just itself. Until that happens, this parsing of language, it stays in the way of recognition. Not that it isn't useful, but until it gets to the recognition that all of this parceling of mind is only leading to emptiness, which is complete and total, not the emptiness that's described by the Buddha, which says all objects are empty of selfness, not that emptiness, the absolute nothingness of mind and all its objects. Until we come to that point, we can't step off the cliff. We don't step off confidently. We just keep trying to parse it into thinner and thinner slices. But by doing this, we maintain the structure of mind. And all of the teachings have said throughout thousands of years, that is the structure of mind, which has as one of its characteristics the veiling of consciousness itself, of awareness itself. So we cannot use something which has the characteristic of veiling to unveil. See, it's not going to happen. So this is the limitation of trying to find thinner and thinner pictures of the mind itself. This will go on, as the Buddha said, this is unknowable in some way when this is going on. definition of awakening, of awaring, of nirvana, of these exalted ways of being. They say, they always use exalted terms, but it's the natural state of being. What interferes with what is already here is mind. So we can go on with this discussion about what is the nature of mind and how can we more and more simply or more and more subtly explain the nature of mind, but it's not until we are willing to risk no mind that we're able to see what is the natural state of being, which is inherently free. Some of us are aware of the fact that we were on this path of parsing the mind for many lifetimes. There's nothing wrong with this. You can go far with it. But ultimately you have to kick it to the curb. You see, you have to see the unusefulness, while acknowledging that using this parsing of the mind, this subtle recognition of what is true of mind, is what has brought you to the place where you can kick it to the curb. You see, we're never in opposition. This is really important. Never be in opposition to what's present in your awareness at this moment, but rather embrace it from the place of asking the question, how can this be used? You see, mind is not an end in itself, it's just a tool. But at some point, you can absolutely see that all the tools that can be employed by the mind possess as part of their nature this veiling quality, no matter how subtle they are. Some of you have heard me say this before. When we begin spiritual life, we move from a dark place often, from a box which is black. And we take up a spiritual practice, we move to a box that is dark blue, but we can see a little bit more light through it. And then some other practice comes along, or some other teaching comes along, and we move to that box, and this box is light blue. Now we can see it's robin's egg blue. We can see through we see more light coming through. Then something else comes along and it piques our imagination, and we start with that. And now we've moved to a box that's nearly clear. And then something else comes to us and we move into the next box, which is really clear. So clear that we think we're free. And we take 2 steps forward and hit our nose on the glass. Right? You've done that before with a sliding glass door. You've watched your dog do that. This is what happens. Well, this is that point. When you can see absolutely clearly, you know exactly what the characteristics of mind are. You know exactly how it works. You see how it unfolds. You know where your conditioning comes from. And you know that this is veiling the truth for you. Now there's only one option. Jump up. See if there's a roof, or if you just jump up and then you fall off the cliff. And now there's no more box. Right? All the boxes are related to the quality of mind. And this is why the Buddha's way of being in the world and the practices which he taught, I stayed in them for almost 20 years. This is why they are so important, right? Is because they offer us the opportunity, for those of us who are very minded, I was, this provides an adequate hook for someone who has a very intense mind to stay engaged in this kind of exploration to the point of exhaustion. Whether it takes a week or it takes 20 years, doesn't matter. Ultimately, you come to this point of exhaustion. You say, now what I can clearly see through the last 20 years of this is that I can't get there from here, and I still know that there is there. This is the experience of coming to the end of mind. Then the question, what is real, can rise naturally. I'm no longer interested in parsing the mind in smaller and smaller bits. I simply want to know what's real. If I die today, what will remain when there is no mind, when there is no body, when there is no emotion? What is real? Now you can step beyond this kind of parsing of the mind exercise. And you don't do it because you no longer believe that what you've been doing didn't have value. You do it because you've seen the end of that kind of activity, right? You know where it's brought you to, you're very grateful. But you also know you aren't finished. They're there. Now you ask, how do I get there? Right? To ultimately realize that there is no there's only here. You see, it gets more and more subtle each time. And we can't let up on this. We can't give up this need for parsing the mind, for understanding with words and concepts. We cannot give that up until we are ready to. We can't force that to happen. We can, in some ways, I say this honestly, you can only exhaust yourself doing it. This is the only way you will give it up, if you're minded as I was. And through my conversations with many people over many years, the ones who have been willing to give this kind of thing up, gave it up because they were exhausted because of it. One of my teachers once said to me, just keep going, fail over and over and over. The more you fail, the closer you're getting. Meaning that the more often you see your own failure, yeah? Because when you first start out, right, you go from that black box to the dark blue box. This can take a long time, you're in the dark blue box. Then you move to the light blue box. Oh, now you're only here for half that amount of time that you were in the dark blue box, and you move on to the yellow box. Now you're only in that box for half the time you were in the light blue box. Now you move to the clear box, and you're there only half the amount of time before you realize that you're still in a box. You hit your nose on the glass and realize the box is still there. So this all begins to compress, and it happens very quickly and resolves itself in the moment that you recognize and realize, oh, I have always been this. I am not different. I have not changed. I have not turned myself into something else. I have always been this. And then the past disappears for you, and the future disappears for you, and you're just here. But you also know very clearly what you have given up, what you have put down. This is why someone like your friend can teach extensively and to many different people who are experiencing many different kinds of storms in mind. But they may still, and I don't know this of your friend, but I know this from other people that I've spent time with, and for people that have come to Satsang that have spent 30 and 40 years in practice, and they're just utterly defeated at that moment. You say, yes,
Great.
welcome, perfect, you're ready. So we value everything along the way, all of the people, all of the love, all the difficulty, all the opportunities we've had, all the opportunities we've missed. Everything has brought us here to this moment. There's not one thing we could have left behind and gotten here. So then this is true gratitude that begins to arise, that we understand that life has brought us here to this moment in this way. Now, what can I say? I don't want that. How can I say that to anything, to anyone? I don't want to be with you. I don't like you. I don't like this place I am. I don't like this state of mind. You cannot say that. Now you begin to say, yeah, this demon is here. Now let me give it a hug. Right? It's here. It's here to... why is it here? It's come here to teach me what? This demon is not my enemy. This demon is my ally. I'm just not seeing it properly, so how do I find my ally? How do I make this apparent difficulty the next ground of being? How do I bring it all in? And the end of that process for you is that you realize that there's nothing left for you to do. And in that moment you begin to feel this love that just wants to love. It just flows. It's just constant. And you can't claim it. It doesn't belong to you. It's just the nature of reality. You are that. So I also want to say to you, Jeff, that my experience as the one who has taken the one seat, you know this term in Buddhism? The one who has taken the one seat. This is the teacher. When that's embraced, the mind can still keep going on with this parsing. But now it goes on with this parsing out of the recognition that reality parsed in one way for you creates an opening. Reality parsed for him in another way creates an opening. Reality parsed for her in a certain way creates an opening. So the mind will still go on at this, right? If you have this kind of mind, like your friend. But now there's no ownership of it. It's just the nature of mind which has moved into the place of the one seat. Yeah.
I like the term awareing. You could say, I is awareing. And then you could, after a while, remove the I and just say awareing. It's a verb, and
Yes.
it's
So understand the intermediate step is what I'm always saying to everyone here, which is move from I am awareing, or I am aware, to what is awareing, or what is aware. And what this does is this creates that intermediary step, because still for so many people, the ability to simply move from I to emptiness is a step too far. Right? So move to the impersonal first, is what I'm suggesting or recommending. If that works for you, that you can move from I am awareing to the simple recognition awareing is happening, perfect. understand that when awareing is happening in its purest form, however, there isn't an awareness of awareing.
Yeah, awareness of awareing is
Yeah,
kind of.
yeah. Again, this goes back to what we're talking about with Jeff, and that is this ability of the mind to keep parsing with words and concepts can go on infinitely. Okay?
Mhm.
So it's never a matter of finding the right words or the right concepts. It's actually a matter of when are you willing to let go of the words and the
Yes.
concepts
Right. Yeah.
and move into what is. You see? In what is, we can't even use words like awareing or nothing or emptiness. We can, those words don't exist,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
There's, even to say, use the word, there's only isness or suchness as they use in Zen, right?
Mhm.
Or just simply that, or
Mhm.
simply awareing, right?
Mhm.
Is still,
Still aware.
yeah, it
Mhm.
still is the mind parsing the experience of being,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
So we use what tools we need to use, always with the recognition that when the time is right, when we are ready, we are going to drop all the words, no matter how perfectly they have been formulated by mind. They will be put down.
Yeah, because they get in the way, ultimately, really.
Yes, and because as long as we rely on any kind of mental concept or wording, we're still clinging
Mhm.
in a very subtle way. Understand, this is not your gross clinging to person, place, and thing. This is a very subtle way of clinging, though, to the notion that I exist separately of everything else. This is the thing to understand about it, is that no matter what words are arising, as long as the words keep arising, they are a tool in which a very subtle me-ness is separating itself from otherness.
Yes.
Okay?
Yeah.
So as long as you know that, you're good. Use whatever words you want until you're ready to
Drop the
step
word.
into space.
Yeah.
Because all you are in the final analysis is the aware space of being. That's it. Again, I'm using words, right?
Mhm. Good to do, yeah. Mhm.
The words are not the direct experience.
Mhm.
This is why I'm often saying the direct perception of what's being pointed at often happens before I speak about it, in the silence, before we get to this conversation. And for those of you who come back time and again, you actually are coming back into that, whether you know it or not. You think you leave here with concepts which are useful, that you can use to continue to move on your way. This is what your mind is telling you. But it's your heart that moves into this empty space of awareing that brings you back. And that happens before we talk. But I'm so grateful to have you all here and to be able to have these conversations. Knowing what the limitations of the conversations are does not undermine the joy that comes from having them. So I want to do the healing mantra now so that those of you that have had enough pressure on your bottom for a while can stand up and, or not, but to give you the opportunity to get on with your day. You don't have to go anywhere. Trayambakam yajamahe Sugandhim pushtivardhanam Urvarukarimitmiva vandinan Mrityor mukshiyamamritawa Svaha bhuva bhu Om Sat Jung Hang Om. Namaste.